Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for attending today's pre-arrival webinar. Today's topic is planning ahead for your transfer to UC San Diego to begin your program here either in the summer or fall of 2022. My name is Pauline de Guzman, and I am the Assistant Director of Student Services here at the International Students and Programs Office, also known as ISPO, and I look forward to meeting you all here in the summer or fall quarter. So of course, before we begin, a couple of housekeeping items. Number one, you are on listen only mode, so you can hear us, but we cannot hear you. Please do stay muted throughout the presentation. We are recording, so if you miss any part of this webinar, you will be able to access this recording at iwebinars.ucsd.edu within the next few days. And lastly, please do ask questions. You will see the Q&A tool at the bottom of your Zoom panel, and please do utilize that tool to submit questions. If you have questions after the presentation, you can always contact us at icontact.ucsd.edu. Okay, excuse me. So for today's goals, we will understand a little bit more about what a SEVIS transfer is and what that process entails. Also, since many of you are coming from different programs with different end dates, many of you might also currently be on post-completion OPT or STEM OPT. We will understand your own specific timeline and key dates to take action. And lastly, once you understand that, how you will then request your SEVIS record to be transferred to UC San Diego and complete the transfer process. All right, so let's go ahead and let's move right along into today's presentation. Okay. So an F1 student is eligible to transfer between student exchange visitor program certified institutions. And this just refers to institutions that host F1, J1, and M1 international students. Excuse me. The transfer process is a way to electronically move a student record or a Form I-20 from one school to another while retaining the same student ID or SEVIS ID number listed at the top of the Form I-20. The SEVIS transfer process does a couple of things. Number one, it sets a date, otherwise known as a release date, on which the responsibility to maintain the student record is transferred to the new school. So this basically means that your current school on a specific date will transfer the responsibility to UC San Diego to now maintain your student record. As I mentioned earlier, it also ensures that the current SEVIS ID number, which is the long number that starts with an N00 at the very top of your I-20, that will remain the same, even though your I-20 is transferred to UC San Diego from your current school. And it also, of course, ensures that our institution, UC San Diego, will now be responsible for updating and activating and maintaining your new I-20 and advising you in ways to do so. So not everyone starting their program in the fall or summer of 2022 is eligible for a SEVIS transfer. Even though you're currently in the US now or maintaining your Form I-20 or SEVIS record, you may or may not be eligible to transfer. Here are the 3 items in which you will need to be eligible for transfer. Number one is your last date of enrollment or your last date of OPT must be within 152 days, otherwise known as 5 months, of your program start date at the new school. We'll do some demonstrations regarding your own timeline so you can better understand this. But essentially, your start date here at UC San Diego cannot be more than 5 months from your last day of enrollment or last day of OPT. Number 2, you must also be maintaining your current active or valid F1 status. So you should be following all the rules and requirements with your current institution or school now, and maintaining your OPT or enrollment requirements with them. And number 3, this is in regards to timing. Your SEVIS record must be released before the end of your respective grace period. For F1 students, you do have a 60-day grace period after completion of enrollment or your program, or after post-completion or STEM OPT. And so you must request that your institution release your SEVIS record to UC San Diego within your grace period. So one of the main things that students usually ask when they're getting ready to transfer is, how do I know when my grace period begins? When is the deadline to transfer my SEVIS record? So this isn't always as clear. You may need to consult with your current institution so that you can clearly identify what the program end date is. It can be one of two things. Either the last date of enrollment at your current institution, if you're not on post-completion or approved OPT, or if you are on OPT, then it may be your last day of authorized OPT, and you can take a look at your EAD card for that date. Now on your I-20, you'll see in the middle section on the first page, your program dates. As I mentioned, it's not always accurate. Sometimes this may not be properly updated. So this end date you can see here, it's an example of June 30th, 2021. This may reflect your program end date if you are now on OPT. However, since you continued on post-completion OPT, you may need to reference your EAD card for your program end date. So here's another demonstration at identifying your own timeline and the end of your grace period based on your current enrollment. So you can see here, this student is currently enrolled at their institution. They're not on OPT, and their last day of enrollment is on a specific day. And you see now they have a 60-day grace period to follow. If they don't take any action within the 60 days, such as transfer the I-20 or apply for OPT or depart the US, then that record will automatically complete. And they will not be eligible, of course, for transfer. Okay, likewise, if you are currently on approved OPT or STEM OPT, take a look at your EAD card for your last day of approved OPT. You also have a 60-day grace period to follow. And if you do not take action, then it will automatically complete as well. Okay, so we referenced earlier the 5-month rule. It's important to remember that your new program at UC San Diego must be within 5 months of last day of enrollment or last date of OPT. So once you've met the requirement of the 5-month rule, you know that you are within 5 months of your new program here at UC San Diego. Here is an overview of the SEVIS transfer process. So number one, we'll determine eligibility. And we can see here, we've already done that by securing that we have a valid I-20 and that we are within 5 months of our start date at UC San Diego. Number two, we need to request a SEVIS transfer and choose a release date within our grace period. So this will require that you work directly with your school, your current institution. This is not an automatic process. You need to talk to your current institution and ask them, how do I release my SEVIS record? What do I need to submit in order for you to do that? Number three, excuse me, number 3 and 4, we'll go over here briefly. Excuse me, there is a plane flying over UC San Diego's campus. It's a bit loud at the moment. Okay, so number 3 here is request your Form I-20 from UC San Diego. So once you determined that you are eligible, and once your institution has then released your SEVIS record to UC San Diego, you then need to request your I-20 from us so that we can complete the transfer process. We'll go over the steps to submit the request in iPortal. And once you receive your initial I-20 from UC San Diego with respective program dates, we'll also talk a little bit more about how to maintain that record and what you can do between now and the time your program starts in summer or fall. So a big question that students usually have is, what is my release date? What date should I choose? Should I choose a later date, an earlier date? How does it impact enrollment or OPT. So what is important here, again, is that you need to request a release date within your grace period, okay? And the last day of enrollment, again, to the start of UC San Diego must be less than 5 months or 152 days. If you choose a release date here in the middle of your grace period, then your SEVIS record can successfully be transferred to UC San Diego. And you can see demonstrated by this teal box here from the day that you release your record, even after the end of your grace period, throughout the time you are waiting to begin your new program at UC San Diego, you may remain in the US. You do not need to depart the US. So I'll repeat that once more. As long as you request for your current institution to release your SEVIS record to UC San Diego within your 60-day grace period or before, you may remain in the US and wait for your new program to start even past the end of your grace period. Okay. This is similar for those of you who are currently on OPT or post-completion OPT. All right. You should also request a SEVIS release date that's sometime in your grace period. You can remain in the US during that pending period while you're waiting for your new program to start. For those of you who have an OPT approved period that might go past UC San Diego's start date, many of you might end your OPT a bit early. So for example, if your OPT ends early and you want to stop your OPT and transfer your I-20 to UC San Diego, what's important to note is that if you are transferring your SEVIS record during your approved OPT period, okay, so before the end date listed on your EAD card, then OPT authorization will end upon your release date. So if you select a SEVIS release date before the end of your OPT period, then OPT will end on that release date. And again, as long as that pending period is less than 5 months, you may also remain in the US during that pending period. So I did point out here that you may stay in the US, but it is also important to highlight that you may also travel internationally during this pending period here, as long as one, you have already requested your I-20 from UC San Diego, which we'll go over briefly, and you have a valid F1 I-20 to enter the US with. So as long as you have those two things in place, you should be able to either remain in the US if you choose to, or travel internationally. Okay, so now that you have determined you are eligible to transfer, you've talked to your new school, you've talked to your current school, and they have provided you with the instructions to transfer your record to UC San Diego. You've submitted all of the requirements to do so, and they now have transferred your I-20 to UC San Diego. Now you need to actually request your transfer I-20 from UC San Diego through ISPO's iPortal. So you'll need to visit iportal.ucsd.edu, usually within 48 to maybe 72 hours of accepting your offer of admission at UC San Diego. Once you log into the iPortal, you will go to the top left-hand corner, and under Services, you will select the New Admit I-20 or DS 2019 request. This form will ask you a series of questions to determine if you are eligible. It will ask you about your last date of enrollment or perhaps last date of OPT, if you're currently maintaining your SEVIS record, and also it will ask you for your SEVIS release date. So it's important that you've already communicated with your previous institution and have the information we need in order to complete your transfer request. Okay. Once you've submitted your request in the iPortal, it does take about 15 business days for us to issue the document. Now, many of you will try to maximize your OPT period, maybe closer to the time in which fall quarter starts, and that is fine. I do want to clarify that you may submit your new admit I-20 or DS 2019 request now, if you'd like, if your current institution has released your SEVIS record to us, or you've requested for them to do so. However, we will not be able to issue you a Form I-20 to complete the transfer until after the SEVIS release date that you indicated on your request, since we will not have access to your record until after that release date that you've requested your current institution to transfer that I-20 to UC San Diego. Okay. Here's an example of the iPortal new admit form. It will ask you if you'd like to transfer your current SEVIS record from your current institution to UC San Diego. You should select yes, in which you will transfer your I-20. Once you complete this page, it will then take you to another page with details of your transfer. And you can see here, it'll ask what the current name of your current institution is, an advisor at your current school, if you're on OPT, your current SEVIS number, your release date, and confirming that you are in valid status and so forth. So we ask for quite a bit of information. It's important that you know where to find it by speaking to your current institution. Okay. And if you have any questions, please utilize the Q&A tool here, and we hope to clarify any of the information that we have gone over so far. Okay, so some notes to coordinate with your current institution now. As I mentioned earlier, the SEVIS transfer process is not automatic. Just because you've completed your studies or your period of OPT at your current institution, it does not mean it's automatically going to transfer your I-20 here. So number one, please do talk to your current school and DSO about your plans to transfer. Let them know that this is what you'd like to do. Number two, you need to confirm eligibility. You might not always know if you're eligible. Talk to your DSO or your school. They should be able to clarify if you are eligible. Okay. They should also let you know if your SEVIS record is in good standing. And they can also confirm item 3, your timeline and process. What date should you transfer your I-20 to UC San Diego by? Okay. Many institutions do require that you submit to them proof, of course, that you've been admitted to UC San Diego. So they may require that you show them an admission letter from UC San Diego in order to actually initiate the transfer to our institution. And then lastly, once you've completed steps 1, 2, 3 with your current school, log into our iPortal and request your I-20 from UC San Diego so we can complete the full circle. Yes, for someone on OPT, your institution name is the same as your university name. Okay. So this process does take some time, as you can see. It takes some planning, so do plan ahead. Although you have your period within your grace period after completion of OPT or your program of study, please do start talking to your current institution. At least 4 months, 3 to 4 months in advance of your last date of enrollment or your last date of OPT, so that you can better understand that process and prepare ahead of time. So let's talk about the things you can do once your SEVIS record has been released to UC San Diego. This is known as the transfer pending period. So once you receive your Form I-20 from UC San Diego, we've completed the transfer, You're essentially just waiting for your new program to start here at UC San Diego. Here are some things you can do while you are waiting. Number one, you can study. So you are expected to enroll full-time as of fall quarter or whatever program start date is listed on your Form I-20 from UC San Diego. However, during the summer, you can take summer classes before your program begins. You should probably check with your college or your department if you are eligible to study. But if you'd like to take some classes ahead of time, you are eligible to do so during this transfer pending period. You are also required and able to report changes to your SEVIS record. This includes your address, legal name, contact information such as phone number and email. Perhaps you're changing majors and program dates and so forth. You're able to do this within your transfer pending period, but not before. Okay. You may also work at UC San Diego. So if you don't want to sit around during the summer, you might not want to enroll in classes yet. You can stay busy by finding an on-campus job. So you are not permitted to work off campus during this transfer pending period. However, you may be eligible to work at UC San Diego's campus, and we have great resources with our Career Center to help you identify some on-campus positions that may interest you. And lastly, you may travel internationally and also travel abroad to renew or apply for an F1 visa if needed. Okay. Okay. Now we are almost to the end here, and then we'll open up the floor for some questions. I know we have some great questions here in the chat already, but I do want to make you all aware of a very important piece in place from the Student and Exchange Visitor Program during the pandemic and for the duration of the emergency. So as of the latest SEVP and guidance, in order for an individual to seek entry to the US for fall 2022, okay, you must have at least one in-person or hybrid course in order to enter. So in the fall 2022 term and through the fall 2022 and 2023 academic year, a majority, if not most, of courses at UC San Diego will be offered in the in-person or hybrid methods of instruction. We will not have too many remote options available. However, depending on your major and department, you may find that you have more remote course offerings than others. Please note that if you are enrolled in a fully remote course load for the fall 2022 term, you are not permitted to seek entry based on remote courses. You must have at least one in-person or hybrid course in order to enter the US for the fall 2022 term. Okay, this is specifically for our students who are planning to exit the US during the summer or who are currently abroad now and are planning to enter the US to begin studies in the fall quarter. You must ensure you have at least one in-person or hybrid course in order to enter the US. Okay. This leads me into the next item here. ISPO cannot activate the Form I-20 unless you are physically inside of the US and will begin your program of study while inside of the US. Okay, so you must enter the US or must physically already be inside of the US in order for us to activate your SEVIS record. Your SEVIS record cannot be activated unless you are physically in the US. Now, I know many of you might ask, what if I have visa or travel issues? What if I'm not able to enter the US for the fall quarter as planned? Due to the technicality within the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System, also known as SEVIS, which issues Form I-20s, students who are unable to enter the US in the fall 2022 term will need to request an amendment or an updated I-20 with a future program start date because they are not entering in fall as planned. However, in order for us to do this, we do need to cancel the current SEVIS record that you hold, and we will need to issue a new I-20 with a new SEVIS ID number. This is important to note for those of you who may have difficulties entering in the fall. If you have delayed entry, let's say in winter of 2023, then we will be able to issue an updated I-20. However, it will have a new SEVIS ID number, which will require a new I-901 fee. It will also require that you wait to enter the US within 30 days of the winter, let's say 2023 quarter start date. And you will need to ensure that you have 3 quarters on the new SEVIS record before you can pursue any type of practical training. This entails CPT or OPT. Okay. I know this was a lot of information to cover, but I am happy to take questions about this specific topic if anyone has any clarifying questions. And we will go over this quite a bit during other webinars, and we'll send out some information towards the middle or end of the summer for those of you who may experience delays, and other ways for us to support you, of course. Okay, so again, this webinar will be posted for you to reference at iwebinars.ucsd.edu. The questions for new admits can be found, questions and answers for new admits can be found on our iNews student website. And if you'd like to speak to an advisor regarding your specific case, as we cannot answer case-specific questions during this webinar, please do come to our drop-in virtual advising at icontact.ucsd.edu. That brings us to the end of our presentation. I'm happy to now go ahead and take any questions that the team might have for us. Let's see.
Thanks, Pauline, and hi everyone. I'll just read off some questions, some general ones that are popping up here. There's one that came up that's asking, having to do with the student's iPortal request and their SEVIS transfer, and I thought it was a good question to kind of clarify. So the student's wondering, in their iPortal request, it shows as preliminarily approved on their transfer request. Does that mean that we're just waiting on the SEVIS transfer to happen? It's a future date?
Right, yes, it's a great question. So as I mentioned earlier, UC San Diego cannot take any action. We cannot issue your I-20 until that transfer, that SEVIS record release date. So if you've chosen a release date in the future, then your iPortal application will reflect preliminary approval until closer to that release date. Once that release date is current, we will then have access to your I-20, can then issue your I-20, complete the process, and then upload your I-20 in your iPortal account and complete your request. That's a great question. Gabi, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you covered it. That's exactly right.
Great.
Thanks, Pauline. Another question here. The student is wondering, is there a cutoff date before which I need to submit the transfer application to UC San Diego, or my school should release my SEVIS record to UCSD?
So yes, we did go through your own individual timeline in earlier slides, but let's talk first about your specific timeline to request for you to release your I-20. You need to make sure that you talk to your current institution that holds your I-20 now to determine your exact timeline. It is usually within your 60-day grace period after completion of enrollment or post-completion OPT. And that will determine when you need to request your I-20 to be released by. However, we do also have an internal deadline here at UC San Diego of August 1st. So please do request that your I-20 be transferred to UC San Diego and log into the iPortal and submit your new admit I-20 request in iPortal no later than August 1st.
All right, we have another question here. A student is wondering, if my current F1 visa has expired, does the 5-month rule still apply to me, legally remaining in the US until UCSD classes start?
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you for that question. Your F1 visa is like a key. So you only need it to seek entry into the US. So if it expires while you're physically in the US, you do not need to exit in order to renew it unless you are traveling. In other words, it's okay to stay in the US with an expired F1 visa. However, if you are planning to travel during the transfer pending period and your F1 visa has already expired, you will need to plan to renew it in order to re-enter and start your program here at UC San Diego.
Right. We have one question here asking, if I don't have an I-20, the student says, I suppose it's like a visa. Is the process similar? Does it take longer to get the transfer and the visa?
Gabi, can you elaborate for me?
Yeah, so I think perhaps what the student might be asking is, so they don't have an I-20 right now, and I think what it might be is the student actually needs to request an initial instead of a transfer. They might not be eligible.
See.
So it's not really, a SEVIS transfer is not always necessarily an option for a student.
Correct.
If you don't currently have an I-20, you don't hold an I-20, which is different from a visa. So as Pauline just explained, a visa is sort of, it's the stamp in your passport. It's sort of the key that you obtain to request entry into the United States once you have an I-20. So those are a little bit different. But if you don't have an I-20 right now, you wouldn't be eligible for the transfer process that Pauline has gone over here. You would have to request what is called an initial I-20, so a brand new I-20, which you can also do through the iPortal. It directs you through a series of questions, and then you would use that I-20 to apply for your F1 visa to enter the United States.
Correct.
We have, let's see, one question here. Do I need to first enroll in in-person classes before I travel internationally during the summer?
That's a good question. So this will depend. New students are not eligible to enroll in fall quarter courses until, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Gabi, I think it's closer to August.
Yes.
And for that's for undergraduate students. For our graduate students, it will vary by department. So no, you do not need to enroll in in-person courses before you leave the US or travel. You just need to make sure that by the time you are seeking entry into the US, that you have planned to or intend to enroll in in-person courses for the fall quarter. As I mentioned earlier, it shouldn't be too difficult to do that since most of the course offerings for fall quarter will be in person or hybrid.
Great, and we have a great question here that hopefully that does apply to most. Are I-20s still being sent electronically instead of being mailed to us?
Yes, that's a great question. So during the pandemic, Student and Exchange Visitor Program did permit a temporary allowance of electronically issued documents. However, it was so efficient and so beneficial for institutions and students that they have now implemented it as a permanent policy. So yes, now and moving forward, Form I-20s can be issued electronically. So you will receive it through your iPortal for you to download. However, what's important to note is whenever you are traveling or passing through a port of entry, you should not show them your phone with your I-20 on it. Rather, you should make sure that before you travel, you have downloaded the document from the iPortal, printed it, and you've signed it yourself so that you have a hard copy in your hand as you pass through the port of entry. A great question.
And another good question here, we get this a lot, and hopefully this will help our attendees here. Should I wait for the response of my SEVIS transfer from my current school before logging into iPortal and filling out the I-20 request, or can I go ahead and fill out the form now?
So on the new Admit I-20 or DS 2019 request, it will ask you for some information regarding your transfer period. If you do not have all the information yet, then you may need to wait to submit it. However, I do recommend that you go ahead and log into the iPortal and begin your application now so that you can determine what questions we will need you to answer. The application can stay in a saved not submitted status for up to 30 days while you wait for your current institution to provide some information to you. Once you have the information, you can go ahead, log back into your saved application, submit all of the information that you need, and then formally submit it for us to review. So you can get started earlier. You don't need to wait for your institution to get all of your information to you, and hopefully that will help you start that process earlier than later. Gabi, is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, that's perfect. Exactly. I would always recommend, if you want to get a head start on it, start your application now, because you might have the information you need. You might not know it, but you might have the information you need. You might know the day that your school is going to transfer your record. So if you have that information and you're able to answer the questions in the iPortal, you can go ahead and submit it now. And even if your transfer date hasn't come yet, so let's say you submit it this week, but your transfer date isn't until June, that's okay. The advisor here will still review your application. They will set it to preliminary approval, like Pauline was talking about earlier, which basically just indicates that everything is good to go. We're able to transfer your record once your SEVIS release date gets here. So that's helpful for us, because then we can just, when that date gets here, everything is ready and approved, pre-approved, and we just transfer your record in. But as Pauline said, if you don't have all the information yet, maybe you haven't talked to your school yet, you don't know the date, maybe hold off and wait until you get that, until you start your application. So, but you can always leave it in saved status too, until you get that information. So we have a question here. Can I use my F1 visa if it is still valid, even if my previous school's name is on it instead of UCSD?
Great question. So if you take a look at your F1 visa, you will see that there is a SEVIS ID number and also likely the name of your current institution or the name that first issued you an I-20 to apply for that visa. So while you can, yes, use your valid F1 visa, even though the institution name is no longer your current institution's name. So for example, since you're now studying at UC San Diego, maybe your current institution's name is still on your visa. Yes, you can use that valid F1 visa to travel and re-enter the US, because the SEVIS ID number will remain the same as long as you transfer your SEVIS record to UC San Diego, following the process we've outlined today.
Thank you, Pauline. The next question here, when applying for the SEVIS transfer, the system tells me I need some funding. Can I just use a statement from my account, like a bank account, as proof? And I'm happy to take this one. So we're working on these a lot right now. Yeah, actually on our website, we give a variety, a sort of a chart that outlines the various different types of financial proof that you can show as support for your program. So that can vary from a personal bank account, that's totally fine. It can be parents funding if they're helping fund your studies. Pauline is showing us on screen now where you can find that information. Thank you. It can be savings accounts. Basically, as long as the funds are liquid, so they are accessible. So we shouldn't be seeing things like stocks or bonds or funds tied up in property. It should be money that is accessible. And the statement, if it's a bank statement or a letter from your bank, shouldn't be older than 6 months from the date that you submit your iPortal application. So here's a chart that kind of outlines what we accept and what we don't accept. And really this chart reflects what the embassy will accept or will not accept. So this is why we sort of do this screening now to issue, but the embassy will ask for that proof usually at your appointment, your visa appointment as well, if you need to attend one. So take a look. It is also linked in the iPortal application, this link to this chart, and Pauline has popped that in the chat as well for you to reference. Let's take a look and see. I have a question here. When traveling internationally while the SEVIS transfer is pending, would we have to report an address change to UCSD before traveling?
Let me rephrase the question, Gabi, just so I understand. So if your I-20 is currently at your, if the SEVIS record is currently at your current institution and you are planning to travel, I would suggest that you request your I-20 from UC San Diego first, and that you also log into your Triton link, so tritonlink.ucsd.edu. You're able to update your local address there if you have a local address in the US already, and it will automatically update on your Form I-20 without you needing to notify ISPO of the change, as long as you've already requested your Form I-20 from UC San Diego.
Great, thank you. Another great question here, does UCSD have a transfer in request form that will have to have our current DSO sign? We do not use a transfer in form as such that your DSO needs to sign off on. So if you do need to have any evidence from us, for example, that shows you were admitted or anything of that nature, you can contact us at icontact.ucsd.edu, but we don't require anything from your current institution, having basically validating your SEVIS transfer over to us. Okay, good question. So should I wait for UCSD to issue my transfer pending I-20 before leaving the US, or if traveling after the release date, is that acceptable? So if you are traveling internationally and you have already transferred your SEVIS record to UC San Diego, yes, you should definitely have that UC San Diego I-20 in hand, or at least downloaded, printed, signed, so that you have it available to show at the port of entry when you return. So definitely, yes, make sure that has been completed before you re-enter the United States. I think we've gotten through most of our questions here. A lot of them are more case specific. And as a reminder, if you do have case-specific questions, please feel free to contact us through Zoom advising or at istudents@ucsd.edu. It's all accessible. All of our advising is accessible via our icontact.ucsd.edu page, where we can actually get into more detail on case-specific questions. We're answering kind of more general questions here this morning, but we'd be happy to speak to you over Zoom. If you're in the San Diego area, we do have some in-person advising as well, or via email, but Zoom advising is probably the quickest. All right, I think that is about it, unless there's anything else you wanted to cover, Pauline, before we go.
I think that's it. I'm browsing through some of the questions here. They are quite case specific. So as Gabi mentioned, please do come to Zoom advising. I'd love to, our advising team would love to meet with you and give you a bit more guidance regarding your specific timeline. I think that is it. Yeah, I look forward to meeting everybody in the fall quarter.